I've been working as a night delivery driver for almost 4 years in Phoenix, Arizona. I've done it all. Food, packages, groceries. Not because I'm passionate about it, but because the night is the only time my mind stays quiet. No honking, no people shouting, no endless notifications. I got used to the solitude of the empty streets, and honestly, I started to enjoy that muffled silence that only the night can offer. Some people can't stand the feeling of being alone in the world. I, on the other hand, only feel safe when the world is asleep. That specific night, a random Tuesday at the end of October, the weather was strange. High humidity, constant wind, and one of those skies covered in clouds so low they seemed to be coming down to swallow you. It was around 3 a.m. when I got a delivery request. The location? A remote address on the outskirts of the city, on a rural road I had never been on before despite all my years of work. Something about that notification bothered me. It was like each flashing letter on the screen had more weight than usual. I ignored the chill running down my spine and accepted the request. I needed to meet my weekly quota. Money was tight, and the idea of turning down another ride affected my wallet more than my intuition. But at that moment, something inside me started to scream. I picked up the food from the indicated restaurant, which, by the way, was empty, with a sleepy cook who didn't even look up when handing me the order. I got in the car, opened the route, and started the drive. The road was narrow, surrounded by open fields on both sides, dotted with a few dry trees that bent like tired old women. Everything around me seemed still, like the world was in wait mode. During the drive, the car radio hissed even though it was turned off. I turned it on just to check, and it stayed static even on channels that normally worked. The GPS connection also failed frequently. The route blinked and disappeared from the screen. I had to follow my instincts more than the directions. After about 25 minutes without crossing any cars, I arrived at the entrance of a property. A rusty gate, slightly open, led to a dark wooden house covered in moss with the windows nailed shut and a porch that seemed ready to collapse. I honked the horn reluctantly, more out of formality than expectation. No one showed up. The house felt dead. No lights, no movement. It was like it was there just to be the setting for a bad omen. Still, I followed the protocol. I called the number left on the app. A hoarse voice answered almost immediately, as if they had been waiting. "Leave it on the passenger seat," said the man with a cold calmness that made me shiver. I tried to confirm if it was the right place, but he hung up before I finished the sentence. I obeyed. I placed the package on the front seat, trying to convince myself that this was just an unusual situation. I sat at the wheel, started the car, and prepared to reverse. That's when the back door opened by itself. No sound of footsteps, no time to react, no strong wind that could have caused it. The door opened as if someone had unlocked it from the inside. A hooded figure slowly got in and sat behind me. I turned my head instinctively, but all I could see was a dark shape wrapped in a dirty hoodie, soaked in something that looked like mud, dried blood, I couldn't tell. "Can you take me to the end of the road?" he asked, his voice low and steady, almost polite. I explained that I was just a delivery driver, that I didn't transport passengers, but he didn't respond. He repeated the same sentence in exactly the same tone as if he was programmed to say it. That was wrong. Everything. But I froze. My hands moved on their own, starting the car, turning the wheel. I began to drive. The first few minutes were silent, heavy, as if time had slowed down. The man didn't move. He just stared at me through the rearview mirror, and he didn't blink. No phone, no distractions. Just him, me, and the quiet breathing from the back seat. It was the kind of breath you never forget. More animal than human. Rhythmic, wet. The road ahead was a thin line of dark asphalt cutting through a forest that seemed to narrow with each meter. The only light came from my headlights, and even then the light didn't seem to reach far ahead. The air was so thick that my windshield started fogging up from the inside, even with the AC on. It felt like the heat had trapped itself inside with us, and I didn't dare roll down the windows. I glanced discreetly at the rearview mirror again. He remained still. The hood still covered part of his face, but the little I saw was enough to make me uncomfortable. Extremely pale skin, almost gray with a rough texture as if it were peeling. And his eyes. His eyes were too wide open, too fixed. It wasn't normal. After about 10 minutes of absolute silence, he finally spoke. "Have you ever seen someone die in front of you?" I almost crashed the car. I clenched my teeth, trying to keep control of the wheel. I swallowed hard before responding hesitantly. "No, never." He paused, then murmured with the same sickening calmness, "You'll see today." The silence that followed was even worse. I felt my heart race, my hands sweating on the wheel, my stomach churning. The car's GPS, which had been frozen, now displayed a message in red letters that I had never seen before. Route not recommended. I tried to change the navigation, but it froze again. But this time the screen wasn't black and it was white, completely white, as if it had been erased from the inside. He started laughing, a low, contained laugh, but irregular, like it was being pulled out of him against his will, like it wasn't natural. That made me feel physically uncomfortable, as if something was wrong with the air, the car's vibrations, even my own thoughts. Then he said, "I've taken 7, you're the 8th. I froze. The world lost color for a few seconds, like everything was in darker tones. My fingers tightened on the wheel until it hurt. I felt a pressure on the back of my neck, a heat running down my spine. The fear was no longer psychological, it was physical. Before I could react or ask what that meant, he slowly lifted a black cloth from his lap. Underneath, there was something that looked like a homemade blade, a thick piece of glass taped to a wooden handle. It was stained, rusted at the edges, but sharp enough to cut me with just a glance. I didn't think. I slammed the accelerator. The car jolted. The landscape turned into a blur. I was driving aimlessly, just wanting to get out of there. By some divine force and or calculated bad luck, I saw ahead an old service station with a falling sign. No lights, but still standing. I turned sharply and entered the gravel space, the car shaking as if it were about to fall apart. I parked haphazardly and jumped out. I screamed for help, for assistance, for anyone, but only silence responded. I immediately turned to look at the car. It was empty. The back door was closed. No sound, no sign that anyone had been there. I cautiously approached. The interior lights were on, the food package still on the passenger seat just as I had left it. I approached and slowly opened the back door. Nothing. No dirt on the mat, no strange smell, no marks on the seats. It was as if he had never been there. But there was something in the rearview mirror, with what looked like dried blood or something dark brown, a message written with a finger. 5 left. I stood there for minutes, maybe hours, I don't know. Time seemed suspended, stuck with my breath. The broken sign of the old station flickered one last time before dying completely. I was only surrounded by the headlights' light, flickering as if they were hesitant to show me what came next. I knew what I had lived through, and I also knew that no one would believe me. I got back in the car, my legs shaking. I turned on the engine and it responded with a muffled growl, as if it were exhausted too. I turned around and began driving back to the city. But the road wasn't the same, the curves were different, the trees closer and the sky darker. The GPS didn't update. It only showed my car spinning in circles at a fixed point. I turned off the device. That's when I realized I wasn't going back, just driving. In circles. For how long? I didn't know. The road seemed to be swallowing me, and the darkness moved like living fog. I began to hear a sound, low, subtle, but constant. It was the sound of heavy breathing from the back seat. I hesitated before looking in the rearview mirror. Empty, but the breathing continued. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from my own chest. I was breathing as if I couldn't control it anymore. As if something inside me was trying to get out. The sensation was suffocating. My skin itched as if it were falling apart from the inside. My eyes burned, and the memory of his voice still echoed in my head. "You were the 8th. 8th what? Sacrifice, target, conductor?" The next day, or rather, when morning came and because I never slept, I was home. I don't remember getting back. The only memory I have is waking up on the couch, phone in hand, and a missed call notification at 3:01 a.m. Unknown number. Below the notification, an automatic message appeared by itself. Now there are 4 left. I started questioning everything. Did that really happen? Did I go insane? I went to the police, but the service station was no longer on any record. I took the car for an inspection. No fingerprints but mine. The technician looked at me strangely when he saw the mark in the rearview mirror, but didn't say anything. Just cleaned it. I checked the delivery app to review my history. The delivery from the previous night wasn't there. No notifications, no records, no ride. But the package, the one I had placed on the passenger seat, was on my kitchen counter that morning, and it was still warm. Since then, I don't leave home after 10 p.m. I changed my number, moved to another neighborhood, sold the car and moved again. Cut contact with almost everyone, but even so, the calls keep coming. Always at 3:01 a.m., sometimes they ring only once. Other times they ring 5 or 6 times in a row. And when I answer, nothing. Just that low, familiar, constant breathing. Like it's waiting for me to say something. Like he's still in the back seat. There's one thing that torments me more than everything. The message written in the mirror that night was clear. He had taken 7. I was the 8th. 5 were left. But in the last few days, the messages have changed. The most recent received yesterday morning said, "You're the 4th now." I don't know what that means. I don't know if the others were found, replaced, or if somehow I was pushed to the top of the list. But I know one thing, I'm not alone. And when the clock strikes 3:01 a.m., I don't even dare to blink, because I know he's near. And next time, he may not wait for the end of the road. When my sister passed away at the beginning of 2021, everything in my life fell apart. I couldn't stay in Chicago anymore. The constant noise, the cars, the sirens, the loud voices, it all felt like it was crushing my chest. My therapist suggested I take some time away from everything to reconnect with myself. That's when I found, in a forgotten forum about America's abandoned places, a small cabin for sale on the shores of Lake Wren, deep in rural Maine. The place was basically a tiny dot on the map, surrounded by dense forest on all sides. No nearby neighbors, no cell signal, no internet. I knew it sounded risky, but it was precisely that complete absence of everything that convinced me. In less than a week, I closed the deal and drove there, hours on the road, until I finally found the rusty iron gate that led to the lake. The house was small, with a stone and wood exterior, a porch that creaked with the wind, and windows so old they fogged up easily. The inside was clean, but clearly hadn't had residents in decades. It was like time had stopped inside. I found it strange that the smell of damp earth lingered even though everything was dry, like the forest was seeping in through the walls. Still, I was determined to make it work. I cleaned the rooms, hung some battery-powered emergency lights, and dragged the mattress closer to the fireplace. It felt like I was trying to make a home inside a forgotten memory. The first few days brought a peace I hadn't felt in years. I read by the lake, went to bed early, wrote in an old journal I found in the attic, and despite the solitude, I wasn't afraid. At least not at first. The silence that once frightened me became a comfort. It was as if every sound of nature, the rustling leaves, the distant caws of birds, the creaking of old wood, was telling me that here, finally, I could breathe. It was on the 4th night that I heard the knock, 3 solid knocks on the front door. It was 2:12 a.m. I froze in bed, unsure if I'd dreamed it, but the knocks came again. 1, 2, 3. I got up, dizzy, and went to the door. But when I opened it, no one, just the wind, and a lake that was far too quiet. The forest around me felt frozen in time. No owls, no movement, like it was holding its breath. I went back to sleep with difficulty, convincing myself someone might have gotten lost. Maybe a hunter or someone from the old neighboring property. The next day, while walking by the shore, I saw a figure among the trees. A woman standing still wearing a faded red coat, gray hair tied up in a bun. She waved at me and I waved back, trying to seem friendly. As I got closer, I noticed her eyes were pale, almost milky, like they were clouded. But she saw me perfectly. That unsettled me. She introduced herself as Evelyn, said she lived in a cabin on the other side of the lake. She seemed surprised to see me, saying, "No one stays in that house for long." The way she said it made me uncomfortable, but I tried not to show it. She seemed like a reclusive but kind person, maybe just a little too lonely. "If you hear 3 knocks, don't open the door," she said suddenly. And before I could ask what she meant by that, she smiled and disappeared into the forest. Literally, 1 step and she was gone among the trees. No sound of footsteps, no rustling leaves, like she was made of smoke. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at the spot where Evelyn vanished. The air felt colder in that part of the woods, heavier. It was like the silence had wrapped itself around me again. I walked back to the cabin, constantly looking over my shoulder. I tried not to think too much about her words, but something about them stuck in my mind like a splinter. If you hear 3 knocks, don't open the door. That night, the wind blew harder. The cabin walls groaned and the sound of the lake was gone. No crickets, no night birds. Like the world had hit pause. I lit the fireplace, made some hot tea, and sat on the rug wrapped in a thick blanket. I opened the attic journal again, just to distract myself. The old pages were filled with elegant handwriting, notes about the weather, wildlife observations. But there were also scattered sentences that gave me chills. One of them was underlined in red. They only knock 3 times, never 4. If it's 4, it's too late. I slammed the journal shut, went to the door and checked every lock. Fastened them all, even ones I hadn't used. I pushed an old console table in front of the doorknob. This wasn't paranoia, it was precaution. A little after 2 a.m., the fireplace began to die. The flames shrank for no reason, even with fresh wood. Then came the knocks. 1, 2, 3. My heart stopped. Time seemed to freeze between the 3rd knock and whatever might come next. But nothing else came. Just silence. I didn't move, not even to breathe. I just stood there, staring at the door. For minutes. Eventually, the roof creaked like something stepped on it. I looked up but saw nothing. The attic stairs groaned, though I was alone. The rest of the night passed with no more knocks. But I couldn't sleep. The next morning, the lake was shrouded in thick fog. The forest seemed closer to the cabin, like it had taken a step forward during the night. I went for a walk to clear my head. I took the trail to the opposite side of the lake, toward where Evelyn claimed to live. The woods were dense and damp. My steps sank into dead leaves. I expected to find a modest, well-kept cabin, but there was nothing. No signs of life, no trails, no fence, no fire pit. I walked for almost an hour until I reached a clearing. In the center were just the remains of a structure, charred wood, loose bricks, and a fallen sign. I crouched and brushed away the dirt partially covering it. The sign read, "Site condemned since 1973, risk of structural collapse." I stood frozen, a chill crawling up my spine. Evelyn didn't live there. She didn't live anywhere. I rushed back to the cabin, every nerve on edge. But when I stepped inside, there was a cup on the table, and steam rising from it. I hadn't made tea that morning. That should have been the moment I left, but I didn't. Maybe out of stubbornness, maybe pride. Maybe because I wanted to believe it was all in my exhausted mind. But what happened next changed my mind. That night the storm began. It started around 11 p.m. But this wasn't normal rain. It felt like the whole sky was crashing down on the forest. The cabin's wood groaned as if protesting the wind. The fireplace went out with a sudden gust sneaking through the chimney. I grabbed the flashlight and tried to relight it, but the wood refused to catch. It was like the air was too soaked for any spark. I wrapped myself in a blanket, sat on the living room floor, and stared at the front door. I didn't want to sleep, not after the knocks, not after Evelyn. Then, at exactly 2:12 a.m., like a perfectly timed clock, they came again, 3 knocks. But they weren't sharp like before. They were slow, deep, as if the door's wood was being pushed from the inside out. And I swear on everything that this time, the door bulged slightly with each knock, like something massive was testing it. I stayed frozen for minutes. Every forest sound felt closer. I looked through the side window, cracked open, hoping to see someone or something, but there was only emptiness. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was already inside. I could feel it, like a presence breathing against my neck. Then came the sound of something moving in the attic, but the house had no internal staircase. How did anyone get up there? The ceiling wood creaked like it was under pressure, and suddenly the knocking stopped. Not because the presence left, but because it had entered. I ran to the bedroom, locked the door, shoved the dresser in front of it, sat in the corner holding the flashlight, trying to convince myself it was all paranoia, grief-induced delusion. But even so, I couldn't stop staring at the ceiling. A shadow was forming above, a crouched silhouette. Someone, or something, was moving above me, walking slowly across the roof, as if it knew exactly where I was. And then came the scariest sound of the night, a woman's voice whispering through the window crack, "If you open, you stay." That was too much. I waited for daylight, curled up on the floor, eyes fixed on the door, listening to footsteps, creaks, and rustling leaves inside the house. When the first beam of sunlight hit the bedroom floor, everything stopped. I grabbed whatever fit in my backpack, jumped in the car, and left without looking back. I didn't breathe fully until I passed the rusty gate, but peace didn't last. The next night back in Chicago, I heard 3 knocks on my apartment door, exactly at 2:12 a.m. And last night, I received a letter with no return address. Inside, a handwritten note, "Come home, it's open." The worst part? The handwriting matched my sister's. I live on the 12th floor, and no one has the keys to my building. If this story held you until the end, then you're already part of it. No need for bells or forced likes. Just tell me down below, what would you have done in my place? Would you have opened the door? Followed Evelyn into the woods? Be honest, not just for me, but for everyone else reading the comments. This community is built by those who feel that same chill. If you liked this kind of story and want more experiences like it, subscribe to the channel. Here, darkness has a voice, and sometimes it answers. My name is Derek. I'm a college professor in Boulder, Colorado, and my wife Alyssa is a nurse in Denver. As most people know, work life can be overwhelming, and between her shifts and my lectures, we could barely spend any time together. So, at the end of last year, we decided it was time to take a break. A different kind of trip to celebrate our wedding anniversary. No luxury hotels or plane tickets, just something simpler, more genuine. Just the open road, our nostalgic playlist, and the silence of the American Midwest landscapes. The plan was a 4-day road trip starting in Boulder, going through Wyoming and ending in Montana. We chose to stay in small inns, explore ghost towns, and completely disconnect from everything. To make the experience more immersive, we promised not to use our phones, only the car's GPS and a printed map. Totally unplugged, no distractions. The first few days were perfect. With each mile we drove, the feeling of freedom grew. We passed through deserted trails, saw the most star-filled sky we'd ever seen, and found the best apple pie ever at a tiny diner called Debbie's Diner in Sheridan. But on the 3rd day, things started to change, and the road ahead became something completely unexpected. It was already night, and we were on Route 79, north of Wyoming. The stretch was deserted. No cell signal, no lights, no traffic. We hadn't passed another car in over half an hour, and the road seemed to stretch endlessly into the dark. Alyssa was in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket, and I was fully focused on driving. All I could hear was the sound of the tires on the road and the headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. Then, without warning, the radio turned on by itself. There was no reason for it. I hadn't touched anything. The first thing I heard was a rising static, like trying to tune into a far-off station. I tried switching channels, but it didn't work. Just static. Then, through the muffled noise, a man's voice whispered, quiet, but clear, "You're not supposed to be here." At first, I thought I was hallucinating, maybe just getting tired. I tried to brush it off, turned off the radio, and kept driving. But what happened next made me question everything. Suddenly my phone, which had been turned off and stored in the cup holder, lit up. The screen showed a missed call, unknown number. My phone, completely out of service, just like we planned. Then Alyssa's phone started vibrating. Hers was on airplane mode, so how was that possible? She woke up from the sound, looked at the screen, unsure of what was happening. Then she froze and dropped the phone onto the floor of the car. "It was my dad's voice," she said, eyes wide with fear. Alyssa's dad passed away in 2017. Now imagine the situation. No signal, phones off, and that number. It wasn't normal. It was a string of random digits and symbols like corrupted data. It made no sense. Not even Alyssa believed what she was seeing. I tried to stay rational. There has to be some explanation. Maybe someone's spoofing an old number, I muttered, but even I knew it didn't add up. The phones had no signal, and that number, it wasn't from here. And then things got worse. The car's GPS froze. The dashboard screen locked up, showing a simple, disturbing message. No way out. Time felt frozen. The road ahead looked just as endless and empty as the growing dread in my chest. I tried to stay calm, thinking of a rational explanation for everything, but nothing made sense. The road, the radio, the phones. The creeping feeling of being watched. Alyssa trembled beside me, wide-eyed and silent. "Turn around, Derek. Please. Let's go back. That gas station we passed, it was 20 minutes ago," she begged, her voice shaking with panic. I didn't know what else to do, so turning back felt like the only option. I made a U-turn, but when I looked behind us, the road was gone. No asphalt, no tire marks, no trace of where we'd come from. What had once looked like a regular road now turned into a completely empty landscape. No signs of life, no path at all. Alyssa gripped my arm tightly. Her eyes locked onto something ahead. "I hear someone calling my name. Derek, please, we have to go." I looked at her, confused. I couldn't hear anything besides the car's engine, but her terrified expression made me press harder on the gas. I just needed to get out of there, so I kept driving, anywhere but there. I tried to control my breathing, but the tension was unbearable. That's when something strange appeared in front of us. In the middle of the road, in a completely deserted area, there was a phone booth. It seemed to materialize out of nowhere, like something straight from a nightmare. It was surrounded by thick fog with its internal light glowing, even though there shouldn't have been electricity anywhere nearby. And to make things even more surreal, the phone inside the booth was ringing. I don't know what came over me, but I felt compelled to stop the car. "Don't do it, Derek," Alyssa screamed in panic, but I couldn't just ignore it. Something inside me said I had to understand what was going on. I stepped out of the car, despite Alyssa's pleading. The freezing night air hit me instantly, and the phone kept ringing through the silent road. I approached the booth. The phone still rang, as if it were calling me. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. The voice on the other end wasn't human. It was a woman's voice. Soft, emotionless. "You have a choice. Keep going, or wake up." What did that mean? I tried to ask, but there was no response, just silence. Then the line went dead. Not knowing what to think, I walked back to the car, the weight of the unknown heavy on my chest. When I opened the door and looked inside, I froze. Alyssa was gone. I panicked. The doors were locked from the inside. No signs of a struggle. No evidence that she had left. Nothing. Just her blanket, tossed on the passenger seat. I shouted her name, tried opening all the doors, searched everywhere, but she was gone. Her phone was dead. The car wouldn't start. Everything was off. I was alone, in the darkness, with no idea what to do. And then, something else happened. Just as I hit rock bottom, tears running down my face, I saw something up ahead on the road. A figure, something floating. It was a woman, but it wasn't Alyssa. She wasn't touching the ground, and her face was blurred. No features. She hovered in place in front of the phone booth, then vanished, as if she had never been there. I felt the world collapse around me. Suddenly, everything turned back to normal. The car started, the headlights came on, the dashboard rebooted, the radio played Alyssa's favorite song. She was there, in the passenger seat, sleeping peacefully, like nothing had ever happened. The road was calm again, as if nothing had happened. I drove in silence, my heart still pounding. Alyssa didn't wake up, didn't say a word. The car kept moving like the strange experience had been nothing but a bad dream. But I knew better. When we arrived at our destination, with no logical explanation, Alyssa seemed perfectly fine. She didn't remember a thing. And when I asked if she felt anything weird, anything unusual, she just smiled and said, "No, I was just sleeping." That answer disturbed me more than anything. How could someone sleep through what had just happened? But like everything else, it remained unexplained. Time passed and we went back to our routine, trying to move on. But something inside me had changed forever. Alyssa, on the other hand, seemed completely unaware of it all, until a few weeks later, when something even stranger happened. We were lying in bed, nearly asleep, when I heard a sound. Faint, barely there, but enough to wake me up. I looked at her. Her lips were moving like she was talking to someone. I watched her for a few seconds, confused, then finally asked, "Alyssa, who are you talking to?" She opened her eyes slowly and smiled without really looking at me. "It's my dad," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "He's okay. He just wanted to tell me everything's fine." But how could that be? Her phone was turned off, and Alyssa's father, well, he died in 2017. I looked at her, desperate for some kind of explanation, but she just closed her eyes again, and like nothing had happened, went back to sleep. And what terrified me the most was what happened the next night. I woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was inside the house. When I opened my eyes, I saw Alyssa getting out of bed. She walked slowly down the hallway, holding her phone. I got up, curious, but before I could say anything, she whispered, "It's him again," like she was alone. "He just wants to talk." I followed her down the hall. She had the phone to her ear, but it was turned off. That moment broke me. Everything we went through, everything we saw on that road, felt like it had come back stronger than ever. Something told me we'd never truly escape those strange connections. And even if Alyssa didn't remember, the road and the voices still lingered like a distant echo. Something was with us, something far beyond explanation. And even now, after all this time, the fear still haunts me. Sometimes in the silence of the night, I still hear her name whispered in the wind. Sometimes I wonder, are we truly alone? Or is something always watching, just waiting for the right moment to return? And now I want to ask you something special, since you made it this far. If you're still here, if you felt the tension of this story, then I know you're searching for something beyond the ordinary. Here on the channel, we share mysteries, stories, and everything that keeps us awake at night. So hit that subscribe button, not just to support us, but to become part of this community that dares to explore the unknown. Together, we'll keep venturing into the shadows, facing what hides behind the curtain of reality. And if you've got a story to share, something that happened to you or something you heard, drop it in the comments. Because here, every story is like a voice on the radio we just can't ignore. And if you like this video, let me know what gave you chills. What stuck with you the most? Are you ready for more? I truly hope you are. See you in the next story, where the road may be even more twisted.